Welcome back to the Perfecting Crime channel. Today's story is a banger, and the biggest part of this story happened through follow-up research where most other stories left off. In this case, a quote-unquote ordinary poisoning attempt turns into a recovery that is written in history books, a brother's love that came to the rescue, a second murder attempt from prison, and how a beloved schoolteacher dug her killer's grave. Twice. How did the killer get caught? What was the cost of the killer's freedom? Where are they now? Let's get right into the timeline. September 26, 1993, Donna Boley is sick and her principal sends her home while teaching her middle school math class. She goes to the hospital, and because her situation is getting worse, doctors begin a shotgun-style testing regimen, trying to pinpoint something. Her husband James arrives and receives the prognosis that his wife was struggling for her life in a near coma-like state. In fact, Donna's heart stops twice, and she's brought back to life through defibrillation. When Donna's toxicology tests come back, the doctors see that Donna's arsenic levels are sky high, 420 times normal. As a side note, did you know that it's normal to have trace amounts of arsenic in your body? These small amounts come through many things we eat, generally posing no health risks, and are typically expelled quickly. The hospital doctors call the police to inform them that Donna definitely is being poisoned. Police don't know if it's arsenic from the water supply, a student at Donna's school, or the usual suspect, her husband James. After talking with James and doing an initial search of the Boley's home, nothing is found, and James's story largely checks out. The next day, back at the hospital, a nurse happens to overhear James having an inappropriate conversation with another woman. Appalled, the nurse reports it to the police. Surprisingly, Donna awakens briefly in her hospital bed, long enough for police to be able to ask her a few questions. But Donna's actually paralyzed from the nose down, and she can barely communicate. She answers the detective's questions through blinking and nodding her head. At first, Donna can't believe police are implicating her husband, but with tear-filled eyes, Donna indicates that what they're saying is possible. She communicates that a couple days before she entered the hospital, James had given her a glass of milk. When she was finished drinking it, she noticed that a strange pink residue was left at the bottom of the cup. Police detectives immediately interrogate James for hours, but he insists he loves his wife, and he had answers to all their questions. James believes he's smarter than police. Police didn't have enough evidence to charge him, so they had to let him go. On his way out, one of the detectives makes a bold move. He gets right up in James's face and tells him through gritted teeth, "We're gonna catch you, and you're going to prison." James walks out of the police station that night a free man. Police soon discover James has recently taken out a large insurance policy for more than $500,000 on his wife and has had many extramarital affairs. They ask James to come and speak with them at the station again, and as they reveal the totality of the information that they have, James cracks under the pressure. He confesses that he did poison his wife, but that he did not intend to kill her. As James awaits his trial, Donna actually recovers with the help of her brother. When her brother got word his sister Donna would likely die, he made the journey to see her and never left her side. He helped her day after day for more than a year of physical therapy to her recovery. He thought he was going to lose her, and the exact opposite happened. Their sibling bond was set forever. Just as her recovery was set forever in the history books. At that time, Donna was the first and only American to ever recover from arsenic poisoning. A year and a half later, in March, James stood trial for poisoning his wife. His defense was that he thought poisoning his wife would keep her at home more so that they could spend time together. Of course, that sounded as ridiculous to the jury as it does to us. And on March 27, 1995, the jury convicts James of first-degree assault, since Donna lived, and an armed criminal action charge for the use of poison in the commission of a felony. Both carry a life sentence, and James receives the maximum for his heinous crimes. At 50 years old, James is given two 25-year sentences to be served consecutively, 50 years in prison. James appeals those decisions and loses. This is where the story takes a huge twist. James had been in prison for about 4 years, and Donna had made a full recovery, returning to her middle school to teach math again. James develops a friendship with another inmate and shares his hatred for his wife and how he wants her dead. The inmate arranges a meeting with a hitman for James. The hitman comes to the prison during visitation hours, and James clearly communicates he wants his wife and the prosecutor that got him the 2 life sentences dead. He promises $5,000 for the job and even makes a down payment. He explains he wants them run over by a car and left for dead. Unknown to James, the hitman was an undercover detective and was of course recording the whole thing. James got his day in court again. This time his defense was that the other prisoner who had introduced him to the hitman was a scary guy, and told James if he didn't kill his own enemies, his wife and the prosecutor, he would kill James. James is a worse liar than a killer, and he's a terrible killer. The jury didn't buy it, and after only 2 hours of deliberation, in June of 2000, they returned a guilty verdict on 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder. The judge sentences James to another 30 years to be served after his first 50 are done. James will be eligible for parole about his 130th birthday. He'll never get out of the Missouri State Penitentiary, where he is serving his time. In one last twist, Donna created a website where she shares her story in great detail, has numerous newspaper clippings detailing the crimes and her road to recovery. You can even hire her as a motivational speaker there. In the end, this is a story about a loving, strong, determined, caring woman and mother named Donna who survived twice her evil husband's attempts to kill her. So what was the price of James Boley's freedom? Well, besides just a simple divorce or not doing the crime, I think James could have looked the cops in the face at his first interrogation and said, "Find the person who poisoned my wife, do your job," and then he could have lawyered up. It would have been a reasonable response from a distraught man facing the death of his wife of 20 plus years, and the police would have never gotten a confession. In addition to that, Donna loved James, and though their marriage wasn't perfect, she never suspected he would kill her. So if he would have dissolved the arsenic into Donna's drink a little bit better, she likely would have not realized what had happened and would have stuck by his side. These things would have cost him nothing and would likely have kept him out of prison. But if we have to put a price on it, the insurance policy was a flashing red light. That type of policy back then would have probably cost no more than $40 a month. The cost of 80 years of James's freedom would have been less than a couple $100. And that's how the crime could have been perfected. Just for the record, James Boley is an evil, detestable human who has been beaten not once, but twice by a hero. Thank you for tuning in to Perfecting Crime, and we'll see you on the next episode.